Welcome to the iSax.Academy YouTube channel. I'm Alistair Parnell, and this is the Roland Brisa. We'll take a look at this pretty interesting new instrument. We'll talk about some of the basic specs. I'll talk about this new breath sensor that's included on the Brisa. We'll talk about the fingering options and the controls that we have available. You'll hear audio examples of the Brisa throughout this video, so keep watching all the way to the end if you can. By the way, that really helps my YouTube channel if you do that for me. Give me a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. I would love for you to leave a comment down below. Let me know your thoughts on what you think about this. Roland have been in the wind synth business now for, since about 2017, 2018, something like that. Now, as far as I'm aware, this is the first instrument that takes up the transverse flute position. All the other ones have been more like a saxophone or a clarinet position. Now, just to be clear, Roland did send me this instrument for review, but they don't get to say what comes in this video, and they don't get to see this video before I publish it. Now, as you can see, it's laid out to look pretty similar to the flute fingering layout. It's just a little bit longer than a standard flute. I believe this instrument might even be a little bit lighter than a standard flute. The Brisa here weighs about £1 pound exactly. Standard flute, I believe, is probably something more like £1.5 pounds. Some very welcome news for some wind synth players. This instrument works on an internal lithium-ion battery. It recharges through the USB-C port here. Roland are quoting a runtime of about 9 hours, which is pretty impressive. And certainly as I've been using it here in the studio, I keep forgetting to charge it up, but it seems to just keep going. One of my pet things that I've kept going on about and trying to convince Roland about is the fact that we don't want lots of wires coming out of a wind synth that we're sort of holding up here. And I'm glad to say some things have moved forward. So that USB-C port here not only does the power charging when we need it to, but it carries the audio and MIDI information out into your DAW. By the way, you don't need any kind of drivers for the audio or the MIDI. So again, we've kind of stepped up here. I've just plugged it straight into my Mac running Logic. It recognizes the instrument as an audio and a MIDI device straight away. The Brisa also has Bluetooth version 5. This is a Bluetooth MIDI low energy kind of rating. It has something called GATT, G-A-T-T. That's not something I'm really familiar with, but I believe it's kind of a standard process of transferring MIDI data between instruments, and perhaps this is the thing that helps us to connect to other devices without any problems with drivers and things. It's just all been very straightforward. The Brisa comes with 100 sounds. Now, Roland, I believe, are going to call these sounds supernatural wind sounds. Now, I haven't been told this, I'm just speculating. I wonder if what's happened here is that Roland are now beginning to devise sounds from the ground up that have been developed for wind synthesizers, rather than perhaps in the past where maybe they have taken sounds that originated on a keyboard instrument and converted them into wind synth sounds. I don't know, but what I can tell you is the sounds on this thing are really pretty good. You've already heard a few of them, and there are more to come. They seem to have really good legato. They're certainly very expressive sounds. Maybe, as we've found in other aerophones, you've just got to be a little bit careful. At the moment, some of the sounds on this instrument seem to be set up to be louder or softer than the others. They could do with a little bit of leveling out to make sure that we don't get any sudden surprises from our speaker. But of course, just like any other aerophone, you can make any changes to the sounds in terms of volume, transposition, all of that kind of thing. And then there's plenty of space to save your own sounds into the user sounds as well. So you can easily make any changes you like and save them as your own sounds. We navigate this instrument through what is a pretty small OLED display. I mean, by the way, while we're on the subject of small, to get all of this clever stuff into this very small tube is pretty impressive. Even got the little speaker here at the head joint end. But that means, yes, that the OLED screen is a little small. I certainly have to wear my glasses when I'm using it, but I'll tell you one very good advantage of this instrument. The navigation of the menu is so much easier because unlike the Aerophone series that we've had, where the options are in such a long list of options, there are hundreds of them. Click, 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 click. It takes a long time to find the option that you're after. Again, this is something that I've tried to convince Roland about in the past, and here, thankfully, they've done something about it. Now our menu it has chapter headings. So if we want to go to a control, say for a sound control, you go to the heading first for sound control and then go into the sub menu. It seems a much more logical and easy to understand system. The other thing that they've done with this menu is they have two modes, if you like. There's kind of like a beginner mode, and when you feel a bit more confident to dig deeper into the settings, you can set it to Pro mode, and then you can get into all those great details of the settings. The Brisa comes in a pretty nice carry case. It's kind of a semi-hard case. The Brisa certainly fits very snugly in there. There's no other place for anything like cables, unfortunately, but it's keeping on the kind of way of keeping everything nice and light. It's certainly a nice lightweight case. I wouldn't want to put it in the back of a transit van to go to a gig, but I would certainly be happy carrying it onto an aircraft and putting it in the overhead bin. It really does a nice job. The other things that come with the instrument, you get the kind of cleaning cloth, you get the kind of sweat bands, moisture bands, I think they like to call it. It also comes with something they call an air blower, I believe. Now that's going to be a little device that can push air into these kind of what I think of as exhaust holes here at the back. That's where some of the moisture, the condensation is going to be loitering, if you like, and the little blower can help just keep that moisture hopefully down to a minimum. By the way, an interesting little aspect of this instrument as well, they've actually built in something, there's something that they call like a little heater or something. I believe that is also to counteract any problems with condensation that might build up inside. So they've had their thinking caps on. Okay, let's look at this new breath sensor here in the head joint. By the way, this head joint is slightly rotatable to your position of choice. Now, those of you that have maybe had a go at a flute, maybe you're flute players, you know much more about that than me. You know, in a standard flute, we kind of blow across that kind of aperture on the head joint of a flute. I know that that's something that beginner flutes find pretty difficult. Now, not so with this, because anyone can just start playing this instrument very comfortably. So in its easiest setup, you can just blow anywhere into this mouthpiece here, and you will get your sound coming out straight away. However, if you want to use what Roland called the flute breath mode, well, then what they've done is they have these two sort of slices here in the head joint, a kind of upper and lower. Now, if you blow into both of those at the same time, then you get the lower octave of the flute range. However, if you slightly re-angle your air or slightly sort of move your lips, you can direct the air just into the upper aperture of the head joint, and then you'll get the upper octave of the flute. Now, this is something that I've tried a bit. I don't find it particularly easy, and I think flute players would have to practice it a little bit to get used to. The advantage being that if you can do that, then the third octave of your regular flute fingerings will all work beautifully on the Brisa. So pretty good, but I think it'll take a little bit of practice to get used to. Now, I tend to use on this instrument what they call Brisa mode. And in Brisa mode, we use these thumb keys just like regular octave keys would be on a wind synth. On a regular flute, these two keys would normally be your B and B flat key, and they do work like that in flute mode. But in Brisa mode, they become octave keys. Now, although there's only 2 buttons here, it actually gives us 4 octave range. If we don't press any octave key, it actually gives you what I sometimes think of as the sub-octave. It's actually an octave below the flute range. Then if I press just the first octave key, that's the one to my right as I look at it from this way round, that gives me the lower octave of the flute range. If I put my thumb onto both the octave keys, I get the upper octave of the flute range. And then if I lean my thumb just over to the top octave key, then I get that further third octave of the standard flute range. So 4 octaves is possible. By the way, with any of these sounds, we can use an octave shift in the menu. So if you want to play some bass sounds, you can do that. In terms of fingering layout, I think things feel pretty good. Like I say, I'm not a flautist, but I have seen some flautists have a little play on this, and they've found that everything has been really super comfortable. They've not questioned it at all, except for one tiny little thing. I think some people are finding that this G sharp key is quite close to the G key. So you might just need to be careful that you don't accidentally push down that G sharp key. It looks to me like on a standard flute, there's just a little bit more distance between the G pad and the little finger G key. Like I say, this is actually an early prototype version. Perhaps that's something they've looked at already. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about the fingering modes. Just be careful if you put it into Brisa mode and you're trying to play sort of regular B and C like you would do on a flute. Remember, that's not going to work. In Brisa mode, this is B and then middle finger is C. So it's more like a sax. Just be careful, that might be a bit confusing if you first try one of these out and you're a straight up and up flute player. You might kind of think, hang on a minute, this isn't working. It does work, you just have to know what the settings need to be for your own style of playing. The Brisa also has some of the same fingering modes that some of our aerophones have had for several years. So, for instance, there is a trumpet fingering mode where the 3 keys on the right hand work just like 3 valves on a trumpet, with the addition of these trill keys. Now, the standard flute does have these trill keys, but one thing to be aware of if you're coming from a standard concert flute, any one of these trill keys or the G sharp key here, they will work from any note, not just the odd note here and there. They'll work on any note. So for instance, if I wanted to do a trill, say from B here and do a semitone up, or from A and a semitone up, and G and a semitone up, this trill key will do a semitone up from any one of those. And if you've watched any of my videos on wind synthesizers, you might have seen that those fingerings can also be used as, maybe we could say they're a little bit of a cheat. They certainly can help in certain situations. A very brief example, if I play a standard C major scale, now, if I put my little finger down on the G sharp key, what that's going to do is it's going to raise every note by a semitone. So if I'm a bit clumsy with my D flat scale, I can just play C major, but keep this little finger down all the way. And I can cheat and get D flat major. There are tons of examples of that are really very helpful. So you do have to think a bit differently when you're playing a wind synthesizer. It's not just, does this thing work exactly like a flute? Well, it's pretty close, but actually there are lots of other options that you can use as well, which are great fun. I don't see any options at the moment for user fingerings like we have on the Aerophone system. Again, maybe this is something that might come up in a future update. Now, let's just look at some of those extra controls, because at first you may not be aware. For the eagle-eyed amongst you, you may have already noticed some extra buttons here in the middle. I think on a standard flute there are actually extra pads there. Now, in Roland speak, those are S1 and S2 buttons. They can be programmed to do lots of different things. When it comes out of the box, I believe that those 2 buttons are actually programmed to go up a sound or down a sound in the list, which is very useful, pretty handy just to move your finger into that position to change sounds very quickly. You can use the navigation buttons on the back to do that also. And there are several other controls that we can use. This instrument has motion sensors as well. So for instance, if I want to add a little vibrato to the sound, of course you can use your standard diaphragmatic or throat vibrato. But if you're perhaps not so capable at that, we can use a tilt to introduce more vibrato. We have a little thumb button here as well. That's very often set up initially to give us something like a flutter tongue. It also responds to rolling motion that can be used for something like pitch bend. And don't forget all of those controls, they can be set to do all manner of different things, either for the internal sounds, or they can be sent out over MIDI to control any external sound as well. By the way, this instrument does also have that very cool feature of having the intelligent harmony built in. That's where we can just play one note and it will produce another note of our choosing at a certain interval away, and you can set what key you want that to be centered in as well. So a scale in thirds won't just always produce major thirds, it will produce major and minor thirds as it should do to follow the scale. In terms of those instruments, we've got the basic categories of woodwinds. So there are flutes, including alto flute and piccolo and bass flute. Then we have more woodwinds like clarinet, there are some saxophones, that sort of thing. There are brass instruments, trumpet, trombone, strings, both individual strings and string kind of sections as well. A whole group of excellent synth sounds, ethnic sounds, quite a lot of instruments that I don't even know what they are, but they sound great. And then there are even percussion sounds as well. On top of that, we've got an excellent set of effects built into the instrument. And there is, I believe, going to be integration with the Roland Cloud as well. So it sounds like there'll be additional sounds or ways of having additional sounds imported into the instrument via the Roland Cloud. There's going to be plenty to go at. So just to wrap up, who's it for? Well, I think obviously the flute player looking to extend their arsenal of sounds. There's a huge palette of sounds, and of course you can link this to any outside source and play endless amounts of sounds from all sorts of apps and soft synth as well. For the wind synth player, well, I think that's pretty interesting as well. I've certainly been finding myself that if I want to now kind of play a flute sound, I'm going for this. It just feels right. It looks right to the audience as well. And it just makes you play differently, which I really enjoy. It makes you do things differently to another standard wind controller. I think it's also great for the enthusiast. If you've maybe played an instrument when you were younger, you'd like to get back into an instrument, you're looking for something nice and easy. Remember, you don't have to learn that flute embouchure to use this instrument. You'd like to practice silently at home. Lots of advantages for that person as well. So I think it's going to be pretty interesting. If you're looking for great courses for your Roland Aerophone, and my next course is probably going to be able to be used by a Brisa player as well, because it's for all wind synths. Keep an eye on the iSax.Academy website. That should be available in the next few months. Take care, everybody. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.